If you've ever tried to make a bezel for a square faceted stone and thought, why is this so much harder than a round stone? You're not imagining it. Square bezels are tricky because they're not simply round stones with corners. The corners change how the metal moves, and the measurements are less forgiving. And if you're using a faceted stone, the seat has to be planned much more diligently. Today, I want to show you why square bezels go wrong before you even get to setting the stone. Here's the thing about a square stone. It may look simple from the top, but the shape underneath matters just as much as the outline. You have the table on the top, the girdle on the side, and then the pavilion on the bottom with a coulee, which is the tip at the very bottom. Some of these can be flat and some of these can be pointed. In this stone, you can see that it's pointed. See if I can get that in there. You can see that that pavilion and that coulee is very pointed. A cabochon, on the other hand, can be a lot more forgiving because it's domed and you have a flat bottom. But the faceted stone needs a place to sit inside the bezel. If the seat is uneven or too shallow or too tight or not planned for the depth of the stone, then the stone can rock or sit crooked. So your first problem here is the corners. On a round bezel, pressure moves around the stone in a fairly even way. But on a square bezel, the points on the corners can become stress points. If the corners are too tight, the stone may not drop inside your bezel. If they're too loose, the stone can shift around. And if the metal is too thick or the corner is not shaped or formed clearly, you can end up fighting the bezel when you go to set it. This is one of the reasons why square bezels feel so frustrating. The corners can expose every little measuring or forming issue up to the point where you're setting the stone. The second problem is measurement. With a round bezel, you can often make tiny adjustments as you fit the bezel around the stone. With a square stone, however, especially a faceted one, every single side matters. If one side is slightly too long, then the bezel may bow out. If one side is too short, then the stone is probably going to bind up in the bezel. If the corners aren't accounting for the actual shape of the stone, the bezel may look square, but it still won't fit. So before you cut the bezel wire, you need to know more about just the stone's length and width. You also need to look at the corners. You need to look at the thickness of the girdle and whether the stone is actually symmetrical. Because a lot of times if you're buying a natural stone, they've been hand cut. They're not necessarily precision calibrated. Now, the third problem with a square stone, especially a faceted one, is that you need to have a seat where the pavilion sits. This is where a lot of people run into trouble, especially if they're used to setting cabochons like this. A faceted stone can't just sit on the bottom of the bezel. It needs to have support around the girdle, and the pavilion needs to have room underneath it. So if the seat is uneven, the stone will rock. If the seat is too low, then the bezel may be too high to cover too much of the stone. And if the seat is too high, then you might not have enough metal to secure it. So the bezel is not just a wall around the stone. It's a tiny little structure that has to support the stone at the correct height and have enough material to push over the girdle of the stone to hold it in place. The fourth problem is your setting pressure. When you push metal over a round stone, you can work around the stone gradually. But with a square stone, the flat sides and the flat corners make the order of the pressure very, very important. So if you try setting the corners first, more than likely you're going to crack it or break or chip the corner off if it's a tight corner like this one. This one happens to be a very, very tight corner. If you push too much on one side and not the other, then the stone is going to tilt. So it's going to shift around. And if the corners aren't prepared correctly, the metal can bunch and wrinkle on the corners, or it could resist moving altogether. And if the stone's not seated evenly, the setting pressure can make the problem even worse. So when a square bezel goes wrong, it's usually not one single mistake. It's usually a chain reaction. It's the measurement, it's the forming, the soldering, even the seat cutting and setting pressure can all affect each other. So I am currently creating a full square faceted bezel setting kit for all of you who want a more complete process for this. The kit will walk you through measuring the stone, calculating and cutting the bezel, forming the corners, soldering, creating the seat, and troubleshooting the fit, and finally setting the stone in the bezel that you've created. It's also going to include a tools and supply list, a short troubleshooting e-book, design worksheets, a measurement worksheet, a long format video lesson, and printable reference cards for you to laminate and keep at your bench. So if square bezels have been one of those things that feels mysterious or frustrating, this kit is being designed to help you slow down, understand the process, and stop guessing. So here's the main thing I want you to take away from this video. Before you make the bezel, study the stone. Look at it from all angles. Measure it from all areas of the stone. Don't assume that it's perfectly square. Check the length, check the width, look at the corners, look at the girdle thickness and the depth of the stone. Look at how the pavilion is shaped. Is it rounded or is it a severe angle? Look at whether the corners are even sharp or if they're clipped, because that's going to determine how you decide where to cut your bezel and how to bend it. The better you understand your stone before you even start, the less you're going to have to fight the metal later. If you want to be notified when the square faceted bezel setting kit is available, check the link in the description. And remember, when the setting goes wrong, it doesn't mean that you're bad at this. It usually means there is one small piece of the process that was not explained clearly enough yet.